This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
If you're going to trade Durant, right, it means things are getting weird anyway. Teams are going to, before they go for Durant, they're going to go for Devin Booker. That's just the reality of it.
You get rid of Durant, or do you do the crazy one? Because you're so far out of the West, you get rid of Booker because D-Book will bring you far more in a return.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
It is night number 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft, rounds 2 and 3 for the entirety of how the future of the National Football League continues to change on this Friday night in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Hello and welcome to the SportsGrid 2025 Draft Special here for the entirety of round number 2 and number 3 all night long. He is the mastermind of the pigskin. That is Joe Lisi. He is OK Dubs. That is Kevin Walsh. I am Ben Stevens. The same two crews with you all night long, which means Mike Blewett and our SportsGrid NFL insider Adam Kaplan live with you for the entirety of night 2 in Green Bay. We'll talk about those players that are still available to be selected that can help an NFL franchise moving forward and change the landscape of the National Football League. The best available in just a moment. But we start, of course, setting the stage for night number 2 and round number 2 just about to begin. Lisi, as we get ready for this Friday night in the shadows of Lambeau Field, what is the number one thing you are looking forward to?
Well, players that could obviously be plug-and-play type of guys. I think it's a very deep tight end class. Mason Taylor potentially is on the board, along with two big play running backs. Travion Henderson expected to go to the Cleveland Browns, and his teammate Quinshon Judkins. So I think you'll see those type of players along with some wide receivers a little bit later. Not as deep of a draft, but these are guys that could be Week 1 starters come, at the start of September. This is what you want to see. Even though they fall to the second round, they can start week number 1. And Shedeur Sanders, how far does he drop in this draft, guys?
The odds at one point thought Shedeur would go with the first pick here, 33. The favorite as that market comes off of the board, Ohio State's Travion Henderson, the running back who many thought could be an option in round number 1 for a team like the Denver Broncos, perhaps. Ultimately, they went a completely different direction. Henderson could get this draft underway. It's what the market believed, Ben, as the odds left the board.
A minus 400 favorite for Travion Henderson not to make a super far trip in Northeast Ohio from Columbus to Cleveland. Of course, as Lisi highlighted, one of the main stories of round number 1, the fact that Shedeur Sanders is still available on night number 2. Where does he factor in to the best available still left out there? That's the question. As we turn our our attention to Mike Blewett and SportsGrid's NFL insider in Adam Kaplan. Guys, as we are about to get underway for round number 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft, who are those best available prospects that can still make an immediate impact for a given NFL team?
Yeah, so Adam, obviously the phrase best player available is something that reigns supreme, especially on day 2, day 3 of the draft. Teams looking to address needs and finding that best player out there. At times in the first round, we saw teams just go straight to the best player. Other times, a desperate need at a certain position. From here on out, I think we're looking at these best players, and it starts at the top, which remains Shedeur Sanders, your best player on the board, but some other very valuable players at other positions other than quarterback.
Yeah, and I would say Travion Henderson deserves to be on that list. He is the best, Mike, the best pass-protecting back for this draft. Now, don't let that 4-for-1 40 time fool you. He plays into the 4-3s. The only thing, and the reason why he's made it to the second round, he's not a big guy. He's around 200 pounds or less, and that ultimately is a guy that you might say is not an every down back, but he's really, really good. But Sanders, listen, you and I were talking before the draft. I said he's not going to probably in round 1. I still say he goes in round 2. But there's a reason why he didn't go in round 1. Mike, there's nothing special about him. He's a good college quarterback. He's kind of like Andy Dalton. There's a reason why he didn't go in round 1. Didn't have a great arm, touch passer. You could win with him. But he's not special in any way, and that's why Shedeur Sanders did not go in round 1.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is clearly a bunch of the players that we've already mentioned, and some of those teams that didn't pick last evening, notably the Houston Texans and the Rams. We're going to see how they open up the draft. They were able to maneuver and stockpile more picks. Then obviously we'll be looking for how they address and how other teams address day 2.
But as we shared last night, entering the opening round of the 2025 NFL Draft, one of the main themes pre-draft, at least, was the lack of movement in that draft order. Not a single trade entering round number 1. All 32 NFL organizations maintaining their original first-round selection, but 4 trades in the opening round, and of course starting early and often, with the Browns trading out of that second overall spot, moving down to number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars trading up and taking Travis Hunter, the Heisman winner, with that second overall selection. So, Kev, as we look at the start here of round number 2, of course, the Cleveland Browns on the clock with the 33rd overall pick. Shedeur Sanders is a huge story. There was a thought that maybe the Browns would be targeting Shedeur Sanders to begin this second round. The odds not necessarily backing that up as we enter night 2 on this Friday. What was the odds profile for Shedeur Sanders entering the second round?
So it began with the thought that Shedeur was going to go to the Cleveland Browns. Overnight markets appearing team to draft Sanders, minus 400 Cleveland, better than 5-1, with the Saints and Raiders tracking behind. But now we have since found out that it appears Cleveland may not take a quarterback with either of these first 2 picks that they have inside the top 5 to begin round number 2. We're hearing New Orleans, maybe not the biggest fans of Sanders, even if he was on the board. The Raiders appear to be the heaviest link. They close as a very legitimate, better than minus 180 favorite, really regardless of where you look, to be the team to select Sanders, which again does make some of this funny because there were Sanders-Vegas connections a little while ago, Joe. We just thought it was going to have to be at 6 initially.
Yeah, and he replicates what Geno Smith does, right? So maybe he sits for a year or so and has the opportunity to watch Geno Smith, a veteran that resurrected his career, obviously with Seattle and now with Las Vegas, potentially leading that team, a pure pocket passer. They want to solidify the offensive line. You have Brock Bowers there. They now have the running back that they can go to in terms of a home run hitter in Ashton Genty. And maybe this team now is starting to come into form with Pete Carroll at the helm. So we'll see how this second round plays out. I do find it interesting, though, when you just look at Cleveland overall, Kevin, we talk about Travion Henderson, right? Jerome Ford, they lose Nick Chubb, right? They're looking for a home run hitter. I am curious to see, because when you look at team needs, it's not glaring for Cleveland right now, even though there is a need. Potentially, they could pick it up in the 3rd or 4th rounds.
Just to add some additional perspective, odds around the quarterback positions, we'll probably mention these a few times. Jalen Milroe closed as the team to select him, with the Browns as the favorite, but around plus 195, 2-1. Not a huge favorite. Milroe had an over-under draft position of 38.5. Then all of a sudden we had entering today a head-to-head market against Tyler Shuck, the Louisville quarterback. We're hearing, everyone loves this kid all of a sudden now. The Browns could be interested. The Saints could be interested. QB3 in this draft might just be the kid out of Louisville.
Only 2 quarterbacks last night, just the third time in the last 11 NFL drafts we saw 2 QBs or fewer go in the opening round. So the quarterback conversation, Blue and Cap, of course, will be at the forefront tonight. Not just Shedeur Sanders, but of course where Jalen Milroe and or Tyler Shuck do end up. In comparing those 2 QBs, Shuck did close as the minus 440 favorite to go in front of Milroe. Is that what you guys think will happen?
Adam, I'll go to you first on that one. Shuck versus Milroe is a hot debate right now.
Yes, Shuck is more ready to play. He's older. Yes, he's had an injury history. We gave him the medical grade. He's got a lower medical grade. He's older, but in a number of schools, but he's got an enormous arm strength. He's a pretty good athlete, where Milroe is more of a project. He's a down-the-line guy in terms of being ready to play.
Yeah, obviously we'll be tracking those same teams, the Giants and Titans, the 2 teams that addressed it in a big way last night. But, Ben, we'll have to see what the Steelers and Saints are up to in this day 2.
Round number 2 just about to begin on this Friday night at Lambeau Field in Green Bay. The Browns on the clock, and the pick is about to be in. How round 2 starts up next.
Enter into the magical world of McLuck.com, where even the smallest of spins can win real cash prizes. Adventure into over 1,000 of the best Vegas-style slot games. So what are you waiting for? Unlock your free welcome offer today. Join the fun where winners play and players win.
2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The early line, only on SportsGrid. The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that ring. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
Just a little flyer, couple of 18.5 point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
First time on a casino floor and feeling a little overwhelmed? Well, here's a tip. Lots of machines have a free demo mode you can try for practice. So give those slots a spin in practice mode before you start putting down some real cash. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Himmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Round number 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft is off to a hot start. We already have 2 selections made on this Friday night, night number 2 in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We welcome you back to SportsGrid's Draft Special 2025. Joe Lisi, Kevin Walsh, Ben Stevens, SportsGrid's NFL Insider, Adam Kaplan, and Mike Blewett here, of course, as well for the entirety of this Friday evening. A slight upset frankly, in both spots. First, with the first pick of round number 2, 33rd overall, the Cleveland Browns draft a linebacker out of UCLA, Carson Schlesinger. He goes 33rd overall to the Cleveland Browns. Quickly here, Lisi guy, as we start with the backer from the Bruins, a former walk-on who had a standout season in 2024. He is the first pick of night number 2. What do you make of the decision for the Cleveland Browns?
Well, doing it with defense, right? They did it with Mason Graham, and now you add Schlesinger in terms of the defense, a linebacker that can run sideline to sideline, led all FBS players in terms of solo tackles with 90 last year. So Cleveland makes an identity. They want to do it on the defensive side of the ball. Myles Garrett, they signed in the offseason to a dynamic deal. Linebacker, defensive tackle, they're building it from the inside out. They're not concerned about the offense right now, but a great pick for the Cleveland Brown defense.
Just again to emphasize, a huge upset here at the closing number. This was supposed to be TreVeyon Henderson. Browns pick at 36. Do they say maybe he'll be there? Maybe they're looking a different direction.
Maybe so, Kev. And as we saw with pick number 34, the first selection for the Houston Texans in 2025, of course, they had the 25th overall pick. Originally last night, they trade out of that spot to allow the New York Giants to come back into the tail end of the opening round and draft Jackson Dart. So their first pick of this draft, Kev, number 34 overall, second pick of round number 2, and a slight upset there as well. The wide receiver out of Iowa State, Jaden Higgins. What do the draft odds look like for the first position drafted by the Texans?
It was supposed to be offensive line. It was heavily supposed to be offensive line, except for a brief moment on Thursday. One of our producers, Chris, had alerted me, hey, offensive line, plus 100 out of nowhere. All right, let's get in the mix. Minus 275, minus 300. They trade back. And with the offensive linemen that all went off the board on day number 1, Joe, the idea was there was a big drop-off, and it forced Houston to pivot here and end up going with Jaden Higgins. I'm disappointed just because of the bet. I can't say I'm surprised, though. It really did not seem like the Texans would be making a pick. If they did go offensive line, that would have been graded highly just based on players available at the time of the selection.
Yeah. Think about the offensive philosophy, right? They lose Bobby Slowick, but they want to chuck the football all around the yard, right? With C.J. Stroud. Tank Dell is injured. We don't know when he's coming back. Nico Collins, the only main target. They struggled in terms of the Kansas City game from an offensive perspective. They have Xavier Hutchinson there, another big play wide receiver from Iowa State. Hasn't really panned out up until this point. But Iowa State wide receivers, typically like Alan Lazard, hit the ground running in terms of the NFL. Yeah. Had the opportunity to interview Jaden Higgins out at the Super Bowl, 6'4", 214, 2 seasons, 2,000 yards, multiple touchdowns. Played with Rocco Becht, a freshman, right? The emergence of him as a sophomore, he broke out last year. He can add another 10 to 15 pounds. Great pick for them, and that's what they want to do in terms of their offensive philosophy.
His Cyclones teammate and fellow wide receiver, Jalen Knoll, could hear his name called at some point tonight, or at least during this 2025 NFL draft. I said round number 2, night number 2, off to a very hot start. A trade early on here in the second round. The Seattle Seahawks trading pick number 52 overall and 82 overall to move all the way up to the 3rd overall selection here in round number 2 for the 35th overall pick. What do we believe Kev Seattle is looking to do with this selection?
Yeah, I think that pick is in, Ben, so if you want to knock that out of the park.
That pick is in, a safety out of South Carolina, with by many having a first-round grade. Nick Emmanwori, the versatile and heavy hitter from the Gamecocks, goes 35th overall, or 3rd selection of round number 2. Kev, from the odds perspective, again, not just a first-round grade in the evaluation of the player, but the first-round prices that backed it up.
Absolutely so. You think about fallers, Mike Green, Will Johnson come to mind, off-field issues, injury issues. Emmanwori, Azaraku would be the 2 guys who had round 1 prices, but there's just 32 slots. That's the reality with draft betting there. 2, I think, players that a lot of people are big fans of, and I'm sure Seattle, very excited at 35. They bring in what many believe is a round 1 talent.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about his ability to come up and run support, take away the half of the football field in terms of the secondary. He is a hard hitter, and at the end of the day is always around the football. South Carolina had one of the best defenses in the second half of the season, led by Dylan Stewart and Imanwari. He's a big play hitter, and that's what you want to see, especially when you have to go up against the likes of the LA Rams and, more importantly, 49ers in the division.
I feel like night number 2 started just moments ago, and yet we already have a single trade and 3 picks made. So, to Blue and Cap, what would you like to react to with this flying hot start on the second round?
Obviously, a lot of picks happening. We're not going to be able to go over each one in detail. I want to take a look at the Texans picking Jaden Higgins. I thought Joe made some good points about Allen Lazard, but they did have a highly drafted player a few years ago by the Cardinals, Hakeem Butler, another huge target out of Iowa State that did not work out. What's interesting to me about the Texans is they do have several needs. It's a really strong team, obviously, with Stroud at the helm. They made some coaching changes, but also their wide receiver room is fairly deep. They have Nico Collins, who suffered some injuries but has proven to be a standout player. John Mechie, Christian Kirk, they got in the trade from Jacksonville. Tank Dell's still there. They bring in Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios. So a lot of depth there, but now Jaden Higgins adds to it.
Yeah, understand Kirk is a slot receiver. Collins is their X receiver. Higgins will have to play on the other side. He's really an X receiver, Higgins, but Joe nailed it. He's not very strong physically. He's going to have to beef up a little bit. But remember now, with the Tank Dell injury, very likely will not play this coming season. 3 ligament injury. It's brutal. It's a terrible injury. You wish him well, but they needed receiver. Receiver is actually a need for them. But Mike, you and I talked off the air. Offensive line is a major need going forward for them as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They brought in Cam Robinson, but he's a journeyman at this point at left tackle. I expect the Texans to address tackle as soon as possible. Thank you.
We are off to a hot start here in round number 2. The Cleveland Browns back on the clock for their second pick in the first 4 on night number 2. And it's an Ohio State running back, but not the one we expected. We'll talk about it up next, live right here on SportsGrid Draft Special.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and you know, launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve to be first round, have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Himmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
It might might not be round number 1 any longer, the 2025 NFL Draft, but round number 2 has featured a lot of action from the very start and a few betting upsets from the odds perspective. The Cleveland Browns back on the clock at 36th overall for their second pick already in the second round. And we told you, right as our show began here on SportsGrid's Draft Special, an Ohio State running back was favored to go to the Browns at number 33 overall, but that guy was Travion Henderson, the guy the Browns selected at 36th overall, his Ohio State teammate this past season. Quinshon Judkins, the running back from the Buckeyes, goes 36th overall to the Cleveland Browns, which, Kev, again, from the betting odds, a monumental upset. What were we seeing in the closing moments before round number 2 started?
You can't stress it enough. I didn't think this was possible. I think it's the single biggest upset of the entire NFL draft is Travion Henderson not being selected in front of Quinshon Judkins. And to put the extra perspective on that, Travion Henderson was supposed to be the pick at 33 by Cleveland. We said maybe they'll just hope he falls to them at 36. Could you imagine going, you know what, minus 2,200, but I'll collect when it's over. Ohio State, running back, pick 36. Quinshon Judkins, a monster upset here, Lisi, that you saw coming the whole way.
I did take.
I was going to say, can you imagine laying minus 2,200 and waiting on that ticket? Because you never imagined.
No, I didn't. Now, I just looked at the football player in terms of both of these guys, right? You look at Travion Henderson, explosive from point A to point B, really emerged as the home run hitter, especially during the national championship run. I think he's a better pass catcher coming out on third down than Quinshon Judkins. But if we're looking workhorse guys, I think it is Quinshon Judkins because of the size. He's got a bigger frame, 5'11", 6 foot, 221 pounds. He transfers from Ole Miss, where he was one of the most explosive players in the conference, and did that at Ohio State. Look at the national championship game. Solidifies that win with a 70-yard, basically touchdown run against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The ability to give him 20 to 25 carries over Travion Henderson. Not a knock on Travion Henderson. It's just that look at the running backs that they have. They have Pierre Strong, shorter running back, right, in terms of body style. You look at Jerome Ford, similar to Travion Henderson. You look at Quinshon Judkins' body style is similar to Nick Chubb, the running back that they're losing that's going to go out in free agency. So that's what they had to do in terms of getting another big body to pound the rock. I love the pick.
Quinshon Judkins goes 36th overall. Not a far trip from Columbus to Cleveland now to begin his National Football League career. Quite a change at number 37 overall. That's where the Raiders were waiting with the 5th overall pick in this second round, but they have traded with the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins move up to that 37th overall pick in Jonas Savaiinaea, the offensive lineman out of Arizona, goes 37th to Miami. We will get to that in just a moment, but Cap and Blue, that's big news because we thought that could be a likely spot for Shedeur Sanders, so the Sanders slide continues.
So Raiders moving out of that pick, obviously trying to acquire more talent. I think we continue to see these teams really being disciplined, Cap, in terms of knowing the players they want to select and the value they are applying to them. So they think they can get Shedeur later or perhaps value somebody just as much that they can get late second or early third.
Yeah, and I think the Raiders here, because they, like you and I talked about this last night, they have so many needs. It's a bad football team. They're recharged now with Pete Carroll. They got their running back, but they need a lot of help. Now, one thing I do want to talk about with Cleveland is they're what we call a volume running game. Kevin Stefanski comes from the school of thought is that it starts with the run game. They have no Nick Chubb. And that guy's got to get a lot of carries. Travion Henderson is more talented, but he's not a guy that can handle a lot of volume. Judkins, by the way, his athletic testing for size are actually really good. So he's a guy that's going to handle a lot of volume. Jerome Ford will be their third down back. This makes a lot of sense for them. Now, I know they need help on the offensive line. There are plenty of tackles still left.
Yeah, so I'm with Lisi in saying that Judkins was really a money player for them. He had more touchdowns than Henderson. At that size, he scored 3 touchdowns in that national championship game. I like the pick for the Browns a lot. I think it's a very happy comparison to Nick Chubb.
Quinshon Judkins goes 36th overall. Jonas Savaiinaea out of Arizona, number 37 overall to the Miami Dolphins. Of course, the Raiders trading out of that spot. They move back later in round number 2. Savaiinaea, the eighth offensive lineman to be selected so far in the 2025 NFL Draft. Night number 2, live from Green Bay, has started with a flying start. We continue here on the Draft Special on SportsGrid. Up next.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and you know, launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve the first round, have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Himmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
And we are back live at the Magic Wall. Mike Blewett and Adam Kaplan taking a look at best players available and obviously what has been happening in the draft. We know Schlesinger, Higgins, Eminwari, Judkins, and now Savaiinaea to the Dolphins. They make a move up for the offensive lineman. The Dolphins, another team, Cap, with a lot of needs, but this addresses one of them, and they were aggressive to go and do it.
Manager, you know, he's got the quarterback, obviously, into a it's got Tyreek Hill, but, man, they've failed on the offensive line. And they drafted Paul, the left tackle from Houston last year. He'll take over for Teron Armstead. The kid they just drafted will be a starting guard. He won't play right tackle. He's going to play inside as they understand it. But they're just a team that you look at them and you go, why aren't they better? They made it the playoffs and they'd lose the first round, but they're just not good enough. But it starts up front, and I like the decision to address the offensive line finally.
Yeah, and so teams coming up, obviously, we're going to talk about some of their needs. You have New England on the clock, then the Bears, then the Saints. Do you expect the Saints to go ahead and address the quarterback position, or is this Derek Carr still looming that he's going to be the starter? If the injury is okay, they're going to clear him to play and start in 2025.
And they're still evaluating, by the way. Mickey Loomis, their GM, made it pretty clear they're still evaluating where Derek is with that shoulder. And my understanding was it was an AC joint sprain last year. Why it's now considered worse than that is a mystery. And honestly, Mike, Tyler Shuck is a guy that a lot of teams I spoke with the last couple of weeks love, especially some veteran quarterback coaches. He's got some moxie. He's an athlete. He's tough. He's got a great arm size, but he turns 26 this fall. That's an issue, and he's had an injury history.
Yeah, no doubt. So New England, another team with a fair amount of needs, but they're going to continue to support, much like we saw last night, going to continue to support young quarterbacks with weapons. Last night they do it at offensive tackle. Where do you expect New England to go?
Receiver. They know it from talking to them. They know they need to address the receiver position. They have an edge rusher depth issue, a cornerback issue, but number one for me for the Patriots, Mike, now would be to help their young quarterback. And I could tell you that they think he's a little bit ahead of schedule, but they have to help him. They need receivers.
And a few receivers at the top of the board. You got Trey Harris from Ole Miss, Luther Burden, the third from Missouri, Jalen Noel, Jack Beck, Jalen Royals, and Kyle Williams, as well as Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech. Those are some names that could go.
They like Williams, but Noel, by the way, is a slot receiver. Don't forget, with Josh McDaniels now calling the plays, the slot receiver is huge in their offense. Noel's a guy to look at here in the second round.
Stuff there, Cap. So obviously we had some other team needs to go through here. We'll take a look at who's next on the board. As I don't worry about my phone, folks, just notes here that I'm looking to see and track exactly where we are going in the rounds. Is Trevion Henderson goes to the Patriots. So a little bit of a surprise there.
Yeah.
Wide receiver still a need for them, obviously, but give me Trevion Henderson.
So Henderson will be a changeup to Ramondre Stevenson's power. Stevenson, by the way, could handle third down, but he's not explosive. Getting explosive playmaker here with Henderson. I like this pick. Now they've got two backs. They could have a two-back system, but they still need, Mike, wide receivers right now. There's no question, but that is a major need for them. Running back was really not a need, but they needed explosiveness in the backfield. I get that. I get what they did.
Obviously, we had an opportunity to talk about Judkins and Henderson and the duo that they were. Both obviously very talented backs going high in the draft and high in the second round. Their stats were very close, both over 1,000 yards on the season, both double-digit touchdowns for the Buckeyes this past season. As you said earlier, Judkins a little bit of a bigger back and probably sustain a little bit more punishment at the NFL level, but Henderson should not be doubted in the level of talent that he brings to the table. And as you said, a huge change of pace, and I would suspect ultimately the lead back on the Patriots with Stevenson filling in for him long term.
That'll be decided by, I do want to make one point. A running backs coach told me, and it wasn't even close, Henderson was by far the best pass-protecting back for this draft. Now, Stevenson, we know, Mike, is pretty good on third down, so they're going to have to make a decision. But long-term, Mike, you select a back in the second round, today's NFL, they generally start at some point over the rookie contract.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you've got the Bears up next, Saints, Bears again. Bears got this via a trade. After that, you've got the New York Jets, Niners, Cowboys, and Colts after that. The Rams, who have yet to select in the draft, will be all the way down at pick number 46. And here's the Bears up here. You see the Bears' needs. They got an edge rusher here at 3-1, cornerback 15-1, all the way down, wide receiver 42-1. Wide receiver, obviously they addressed in a big way with Rome Odunze, but Keenan Allen has walked in free agency, but DJ Moore there and Odunze there, supporting Caleb Williams, but perhaps a third weapon for the Bears at some point this evening with the 2 picks here in the second round.
Remember what they surprised us with the tight end in the first round last night. That floored me. I mean, I thought that was very, very out there. Hey, but you know what? They're going to be explosive on offense, but they got to get edge rusher help. They don't have a third edge. They don't have anyone who's a high-end pass rusher. They need juice off the edge, and that's something they got to look at here.
Okay, so again, Henderson, the last one, picked Bears on the clock. Let's take a step back, though, and continue to talk about this QB market. You still have everybody left other than Dart and Ward, and you've got Sanders and Shuck we've talked about as well. I'd like to talk about that next tier of players, some of those other quarterbacks that we've discussed on the whole and a lot leading up to the draft, but perhaps have not really been able to slot them in to see where they would go. We mentioned the Rams as a team that could address a potential backup quarterback to Matt Stafford. The Steelers and the Saints at the top of that list. How about some other teams that could be in the market for somebody like Kyle McCord, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, those types of players? Anybody else that you see that could go in day 2?
Well, here's the thing. Your Steelers don't have a second-round pick. So we got to focus on them for the third round for a quarterback. It's fascinating. And Cleveland, Mike, did not draft a quarterback here. They didn't draft a quarterback with one of the – they had 2 picks in the first 4. They didn't draft a quarterback, which kind of surprises me. And they have more picks later that they could address a quarterback. Now, a guy that I want to address right here, not right now, but just in terms of where he might go, Quinn Ewers in the third round, he had that oblique injury, right? I'm told he was fine. In fact, he threw the ball at the combine very, very well. This is a guy that needed to throw the ball well in front of people. That's why you throw at the combine.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe, I think a polarizing player for some. Clearly a very athletic quarterback. He had a lot of success in college in terms of racking up wins, but Alabama did not get to the playoff under his stewardship this year.
Yeah.
And there are some people that have a lot of concerns about his inability to perhaps throw the ball consistently across the middle of the field.
Yeah, and his issue is accuracy and processing. He's a big kid, hard worker. Accuracy, I saw at the Senior Bowl, was not very good, but he is by far the best running quarterback for this draft. He is dynamic with the ball in his hands. In fact, I know some teams who might line him up, though he's a quarterback a little bit, as a Wildcat quarterback. He is a really interesting football player, but Mike, let's call it like it is. This was not a good quarterback draft, right? Luther Burden, by the way, who's going to go to the Bears. Now, he'll be their third receiver. Luther Burden, as we transfer back to the Bears, who we just talked about, they didn't have a third receiver. You were right with Keenan Allen's contract being up. So people want to know, why did Luther Burden drop from Missouri out of the first round? Nothing off the field. I'm told it's football character. There's nothing to do off the field. He's a good person. But interviews, I'm told, by multiple teams were not very good. When the ball's not in his hands, there's a question of how hard he works to get the football. He's great, dynamic with the ball in his hands. It's called what do you do without the ball when you're not getting it. Tape wasn't good in that area. To be honest with you, Mike, though I was surprised that he didn't go in the first round, talking to a couple of receiver coaches today, I understand. There's something about his game that was lacking. That's why he dropped. But this is a great value. By the way, Mike, great value to the Bears here for Luther Burden.
So the Bears did a lot of work on the offensive line through free agency. And in the draft, they now get Colston Loveland and Luther Burden to add to the room that contains DJ Moore and Roma Dunze. So you have to say the Bears might start to pivot towards defense at some point during this draft. They have another pick coming up in just a couple of picks. But on the clock right now, the New Orleans Saints, that will be a very telling pick, perhaps in the quarterback market. Kellen Moore, the new coach, obviously getting players that are in his style, and it may be a change from previous regimes, certainly a big change from Dennis Allen. Adam and I and the rest of the crew will be right back on SportsGrid after this.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and you know, launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve to be first round, have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Himmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
If you're going to trade Durant, right, it means things are getting weird anyway. Teams are going to, before they go for Durant, they're going to go for Devin Booker. That's just the reality of it.
You get rid of Durant, or do you do the crazy one because you're so far out of the West? You get rid of Booker because D-Book will bring you far more in a return.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid. This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
If you're going to trade Durant, right, it means things are getting weird anyway. Teams are going to, before they go for Durant, they're going to go for Devin Booker. That's just the reality of it.
You get rid of Durant, or do you do the crazy one because you're so far out of the West? You get rid of Booker because D-Book will bring you far more in a return.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid. This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
If you're going to trade Durant, right? It means things are getting weird anyway. Teams are going to, before they go for Durant, they're going to go for Devin Booker. That's just the reality of it.
You get rid of Durant, or do you do the crazy one because you're so far out of the West? Do you get rid of Booker because D-Book will bring you far more in a return?
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
If you're going to trade Durant, right? It means things are getting weird anyway. Teams are going to, before they go for Durant, they're going to go for Devin Booker. That's just the reality of it.
You get rid of Durant, or do you do the crazy one because you're so far out of the West? Do you get rid of Booker because D-Book will bring you far more in a return?
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
If you're going to trade Durant, right? It means things are getting weird anyway. Teams are going to, before they go for Durant, they're going to go for Devin Booker. That's just the reality of it.
You get rid of Durant, or do you do the crazy one because you're so far out of the West? you get rid of Booker because D-Book will bring you far more in a return.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid. This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
If you're going to trade Durant, right, it means things are getting weird anyway. Teams are going to, before they go for Durant, they're going to go for Devin Booker. That's just the reality of it.
You get rid of Durant, or do you do the crazy one because you're so far out of the West? You get rid of Booker because D-Book will bring you far more in a return.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid. This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ.
SportsGrid's 2025 NFL Draft coverage interrupted briefly by some technical difficulties. We appreciate all of you who stick with us here for this Friday night on SportsGrid. A number of picks have happened since we last spoke to you. Some surprises, some, though, that, again, a couple of months ago, if you were hiding under a rock, you never would have believed. But if you've been tracking the markets, Joe, Tyler Shuck off the board is QB3. Somehow, some way, not that surprising. But is it the right decision that the Saints made picking the Louisville quarterback in front of Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, or any other quarterback that comes to mind?
I personally don't think so. And I followed Tyler Shuck throughout his career in terms of Oregon, then Texas Tech, and last year with Louisville. You know, he's more, in my opinion, of a compiler. Big games, he does struggle. At times, he does force balls into coverage, and I think that's a main concern in terms of the next level. He was utilized at Texas Tech in terms of the RPO game, more of an RPO power. They like to run him right behind the center and guard in terms of those type of plays. Can that translate in terms of Kellen Moore's offense? We'll see. But, you know, for years, Kev, you know, it was always brought up, Brandon Weeden and some of the other quarterbacks last year that were older, that, oh, you don't want the age, the 26-year-old quarterback, the journeyman. It's not good. To see Kellen Moore in New Orleans sort of reach up and grab Tyler Shuck, it's a little bit shocking because he didn't have a great combine like some of the other quarterbacks. And if you're asking me, just pure quarterbacks, I would have taken Shedeur Sanders over Tyler Shuck in a heartbeat.
What I think is fascinating is, due to the current Derek Carr uncertainty, the idea is whomever the Saints drafted at quarterback has a legitimate chance to be their week one starter, probably in a battle against Spencer Rattler, all depending on how the news breaks around Derek Carr. So if you want to sell me that the Saints' best chance at winning games is with the most veteran quarterback prospect, sure. But is this an answer for the future? I don't think so. I don't think even the New Orleans Saints believe that to be the case. And if that's the point, well, maybe address the edge position. Donovan Ezeraku, Mike Green both come to mind. Two names, by the way, that many thought would go in round number 1. Still on the board. We're going to check in with Adam Kaplan and Mike Blewett when we get back right here on our draft coverage to talk about some of the fallers. Will Johnson, also another name that we haven't seen called yet. We understood maybe to some degree a fall, but we are nearing the 50s in this draft. We'll talk about it all next right here on SportsGrid.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and you know, launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve the first round, I have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Hemi, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Oh, no, we're in.
Oh, I see. Back with you here on SportsGrid, the 2025 NFL Draft, day number 2, round number 2, currently ongoing. I'm Kevin Walsh, Joe Lisi right here beside me. We work to get our guy Ben Stevens back in the mix, hopefully very, very soon. But we do, of course, still have the help of both Mike Blewett and Adam Kaplan. And since, fellas, we last talked, the Dallas Cowboys stopped what is one of the biggest fallers in this draft, Donovan Ezeraku. Mike, what are you hearing around this situation?
All right, so BC gets their guy off the board, and he goes to Dallas. We talked a lot about how Ezeraku could be a first-round pick. Kevin has tracked it all throughout. His market was expected to be a first-round player to be selected. But what we would say about Ezeraku is that very productive in college. He does not have the eye-popping traits that guys like a James Pierce did that is drafted in the first round. So I think Dallas, who really loves edge rushers, defensive ends, those types of impact defensive players, is going to really like him, but he may not be comparable to some of the eye-popping plays that Micah Parsons makes.
I would say this. He was widely around the NFL, expected to be a top 40 pick. So him going here makes sense. So why didn't he go in the first round? Not real big physically. Has some length, but he's not real strong physically, so that's a problem. Yes, he had 16.5 sacks, but when personnel people graded him, some were where it didn't take a lot of effort. Not that he didn't put effort, but they weren't like big-time sacks. He's a good player. The the Cowboys will get him in the rotation early. Remember, they lost to Marcus Lawrence. They let him go. He signed with Seattle. Golston, who was their top backup edges, he's gone. He signed with the Giants. So they had a need here. I get that part of it. No question about it. They needed another edge rusher, a young developmental guy. This is a good spot for him. Not a lot of pressure. We'll get the Parsons deal done. Jerry always waits, as we know, Mike. They'll take care of that closer to training camp. But the bottom line is here, they get a really good value here. And by the way, he's a super high character guy, which you know, being a BC guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kev, they don't really go for the splashy trades or maybe the biggest name players in this draft, but Dallas so far another solid addition.
Absolutely there, Mike. I think we go back to round number 1 and just through the market, I was tempted on some Dallas defensive line bets because they, to me, truly are the kings of BPA. So there is a party that wonders if Michael Williams had been available at 12, went pick 11. Could that have been the selection? I think Dallas probably feels even better about the Tyler Booker pick now at 12, knowing they got what, again, a lot of people believe is a round 1 quality player at pick 44 in Donovan Ezeraku.
Yeah, 6'3", 248. And think about Dallas's defense over the past couple of years, right? They wore down, especially in run support. You have a dynamic player in terms of Micah Parsons, but he can't be a one-man wrecking crew. You need complementary pieces, and Ezeraku is a player with huge upside, right? You talk about a guy that comes off the edge. I think he's good and much better in run support. We'll see how it pans out with Dallas, but again, you get a quality guy with a high-end motor, and he could still maybe add some size. Dallas needs all the help they can. I know they need wide receiver help. You could worry about the offense in the later rounds. Worry about the defense because that's why they didn't make the playoffs last year.
To go back to a pick that we were not live with you for, that was pick 42 overall, the 10th selection in round number 2. Mason Taylor out of LSU, the tight end, goes to the New York Jets. And I think sometimes you see a round 2 pick really justify a day 1 pick. That may be slightly the case with Ezeraku, right? At 44, I think it is definitely the case with Mason Taylor at 42. Jets fans wanted Tyler Warren. But I think if you said, hey, would you prefer Armand Membu and Mason Taylor or Tyler Warren and whomever you believe the best tackle on the board is, and we all know the drop-off the league believes there is from the tackles that were taken in round number 1, especially someone of Armand Membu's caliber, Joe, to pair with Warren. I think Jets fans have to be elated to see the first 2 picks now be Membu and Taylor.
Yeah, if you haven't watched Mason Taylor play, you're getting a guy that's very similar to Zach Ertz in terms of what Jaden Daniels has, and I'm talking about young Zach Ertz with the Philadelphia Eagles. He is a pure route runner. He's not another offensive lineman in terms of run blocking. He can maybe help out in terms of that area. Very strong, great hands. Jason Taylor's son. We're talking about big games. Played in a pro-style offense with Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, you talk about clutch, 4th downs, 3rd down type of plays for LSU over the past couple of seasons. Not just with Nussmeier, but Jaden Daniels. Mason Taylor stepped up. And I can tell you this right now. I've been all in terms of what the New York Jets did in terms of the offseason with Aaron Glenn and now Justin Fields. You add Membu, you add Mason Taylor to that offense. I'm telling you, they're going over their win total. They're making the playoffs potentially this year.
Some love right now for the New York Jets with their decision to bring in Mason Taylor. I want to look ahead, Mike and Adam, and that's at pick 46, the LA Rams. Every single team has made a selection outside of Sean McVay's guys in Los Angeles. There was a moment we wondered, could they go quarterback in round number 1? Sanders, Milroe, these guys are on the board. What could we expect, Mike, out of the Los Angeles Rams with their first pick of this NFL draft?
After Ezeraku, just one thing, Colts select JT Tui Moalau out of Ohio State, the edge rusher. Now back to the Rams.
Yep.
George Sanders still there, obviously. We've talked extensively about how the Rams may go with a backup quarterback here. It is round 2. The Rams, definitely the most comfortable team in the league, not picking in the first round. So they're accustomed to making these late picks for the first time in the draft.
Yeah, and Mike, by far their biggest need remains cornerback. They can't really line up right now. Remember, they are in the Jalen Ramsey sweepstakes to actually reacquire him. So got to look at corner here now. What does Sean McVay like? What does he prefer? He likes pocket passers. Shedeur Sanders is a pocket passer. So is Matthew Stafford, who is well into his 30s, turns 37. So this would be a time to consider it. But I'm telling you, there's some cornerbacks who are going to have higher grades here. Corner, to me, is their number one need. It's not close. If they want to win that NFC West, they've got to address it. In fact, they could two developmental corners.
Talked a lot last night about how the NFC West is a pretty fascinating division. Teams really changing their personality. The Rams, the most stable of the bunch, quarterback and head coach still intact. Other teams making a lot of moves. But before I wrap up, go back to Kev. I really do love the Mason Taylor pick. First 100 reception, 1,000-yard receiver, tight end rather, in LSU history, and the Jets with two big athletes. Back to you, Kev.
Just stick with the LA Rams here, Joe. This is a team that year in, year out, I find you to be invested in. I don't know if that. I didn't even want to.
The early line clip. Should we bring it up?
Well,
let's bring it up. Get that clip. I caught you.
All right. Hat off. You love the Rams every year. Rams. So are you going to be a little bit annoyed if at 46 they pick a quarterback which won't help your inevitable future on this team to win the Super Bowl?
No, but I did say in terms of the first round that they were potentially in the mix at 14-1 to potentially get Matt Stafford's successor, right? It was clear that they were looking to draft or move on from him in the offseason. They shopped him around. He comes back, and now it's the last hurrah to potentially make an NFC championship, run. And they're going to have to beat the Philadelphia Eagles in order to do that. So, again, I think they can go quarterback here. I personally would go Shedeur Sanders over anybody else, over Jalen Milroe, just because, again, you're talking about Shedeur Sanders stepping up with one of the worst offensive lines in the nation, not just for 1 year, 2 years, and he did it. He's a pocket passer, and he has room to grow with McVay's offense and tutelage. It would be a great pick if they wanted to go in terms of the quarterback position.
They certainly have a world of options in front of them if they do want to address the corner position, as Cap mentioned. Not only Will Johnson on the board, but Amos, did have round one buzz. We'll find out after this quick commercial break.
Enter into the magical world of McLuck.com, where even the smallest of spins can win real cash prizes. Adventure into over 1,000 of the best Vegas-style slot games. So what are you waiting for? Unlock your free welcome offer today. Join the fun where winners play and players win.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid. The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
Rearranging that roof. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of 15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
First time on a casino floor and feeling a little overwhelmed? Well, here's a tip. Lots of machines have a free demo mode you can try for practice. So give those slots a spin in practice mode before you start putting down some real cash. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff Hemmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
What time it started just now? Jumping.
Back in the right here on SportsGrid. NFL Draft Special 2025 edition. The LA Rams at pick 46 put us to sleep. Come on. We wanted juice. We wanted, with respect to Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, the tight end, who could certainly be a good player in this offense. I wanted a quarterback, a little something fun. Or a wide receiver. We touched the plus 900. I'm just saying. Nevertheless, Joe, how do you feel about Ferguson to L.A.?
I understand the need. I do. I don't like the pick overall because, again, I think they could have gotten maybe, a quarterback to your mention. I would have taken Shedeur Sanders. But, again, they want to win now. They made it to the playoffs. They pushed Philadelphia to the limit, lose that game by 5. Matt Stafford's only there for a couple of years. You need to make a playoff push. They have Devontae Adams. They have Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams. They don't have a lot, or they don't have an explosive tight end. Higsby was hurt for much of the year. Colby Parkinson, non-existent. Ferguson's a guy that could come in, play right away. He's a huge target underneath for Matt Stafford. He runs very good routes. Picked up, especially when they got blown out against Ohio State in the playoff loss. Ferguson was a main target in terms of that offense for Dylan Gabriel. So I think it's a pretty good pick. Getting him in the second round, great size. But again, I would have went quarterback for the Rams.
All right, we want to throw it over to our guys in our Eastern Core room over there. It's Ben Stevens. It's Adam Kaplan. The Rams take a tight end, Ben.
Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, Cap, goes in this spot. The Rams, of course, trading out of the 26th overall pick last night. This their first selection. Only one first-round pick for Les Snead and L.A. since 2016. It was last season. It was Jared Verse, who ended up being the Defensive Rookie of the Year. What exactly is that Rams drafting philosophy they have put on display the last decade?
I'll say this. They're pretty consistent on offense, explosive playmakers. So let's talk about Terrence Ferguson, Ben. When you look at their two tight ends that they have, Tyler Higbee, 30 years old, he had the ACL injury the year before. Colby Parkinson is a wide tight end. That means in line. They need an explosive playmaker. So I get this. But they've invested pretty big resources in Higbee. Parkinson's getting pretty good coin. Now, obviously, this kid will be on his rookie deal, so he'll eventually replace those guys. I get it. Now, the need is still there. It's by far at plus 260. Cornerback is their biggest need. If they want to compete for a Super Bowl, it's not going to be with Ahkello Witherspoon, who's a journeyman, okay? Let's call it like it is. Darius Williams was originally a Ram. Then he went to Baltimore, and he's back. So they know they need to get younger at corner. It remains a need. Look, the fact that they're in for Jalen Ramsey tells you he's going to turn 31 years old. They know it's a need.
So let me ask you a quick follow-up question because we see cornerback at plus 260. Yep. I almost bet the price at plus 210 for this to be the first position drafted by L.A. entering night number 2. Will Johnson still remains available right now. What are you hearing about how significant that knee injury was for Will?
Oh, actually, I'm told training camp will not be a problem for him, but here's another thing you should know. He's a zone corner, an off-coverage corner. He's not a guy who could play man. I'm told the tape shows he's not real comfortable with it. So that tells you certain systems he can't play in. If you're a team that plays a high percentage of man, you're not going to want Will Johnson. And by the way, man, there are a lot of good corners still left. There are about 5 or 6 guys you could say legitimately should still go in the second round at that position.
And we just mentioned the guy, Will Johnson. He was drafted 47th overall by the Arizona Cardinals. Somebody's ears were hot out in the desert, so the cornerback out of Michigan ends his significant draft slide, drafted 47th overall, the 15th pick here in round number 2. Kev, from the odds perspective, again, we thought Will Johnson was a surefire first-rounder. He finds his way to the second round. The Cards draft him at 47th overall.
We sure did, and I'm sure the risk for Arizona now feels minimal. We saw round 1 predictions for this pairing of Will Johnson and the Arizona Cardinals. It does remind me a little bit of Philly last year and the Cooper DeJean mock drafts that were wrong but not, as they got him just in round number 2. I know the injury is worrisome, Joe, but in Arizona, they have to be elated.
There's two teams from a defensive perspective that I think have won it in terms of day 1 and day 2. I said day 1 was Atlanta in terms of the edge rushers that they got, Walker and Pierce yesterday. And look at what Arizona's done. Walter Nolan with pick number 1, and you get a lockdown corner in terms of Will Johnson. I just think Gannon is a guy that I was skeptical at first of him being an elite coach, but he's shown progression. They missed out on the playoffs, lose to Carolina. They have the offensive pieces in place. Trey McBride, James Conner. They have Harrison, the big play wide receiver. You have now Kyler Murray. You got to shore up the defensive side of the ball if you're going to compete in the NFC, and that's what they did. I love the pick in terms of Will Johnson.
Now, I want to just move back to pick 48. Where the Texans are now on the clock. It was supposed to be the Raiders. The Raiders have now traded back twice already here today. What is stunning about this is the Raiders were the team most linked to Shedeur Sanders entering this day number 2 of the NFL draft. What I cannot figure out, though, Joe, is if you like a quarterback, to play this game is bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Even if the Raiders he's going to be there, let's not worry about it. We'll get him at 58 or top of round number 3. I do not understand why you would, one, run the risk, and I understand, it's the big leagues. Everybody's a big boy. But Shedeur now is feeling a lot of pressure, having watched his name not called yet. You have the chance to stop that, and the Raiders just keep trading back.
Yeah, it's crazy. If they're looking to take Shedeur, they're not going about it by the right way, right?
Well said.
I disagree with that type of mentality out of the organization. I can tell you from just watching him play in college for 2 years, moving from Jackson State to his 2 years in Colorado, I believe he's a much better quarterback than Tyler Shough and has better upside. And I think he, from day 1, will be much better than Jackson Dart. Only time will tell in terms of which team is willing to pull the trigger, Kev. But again, the fact that potentially he might fall out of the second round at this point is shocking.
Yeah, I think I was kind of adamant. People are talking about the Shedeur fall. Him not going yesterday, I actually didn't think was stunning. I thought Shedeur Sanders not being selected up until this point, though, and now feeling like it could be round 3 is. We'll talk about it after a break with you more on SportsGrid.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve the first round, have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Himmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Live with you here on this Friday night. It is SportsGrid's 2025 NFL Draft Special. I can only fake this smile for so long. The Texans hurt the people today. So, Ben, I ask a favor. Can you handle letting the people know what just happened?
Yeah, 48th overall, the Houston Texans trade up once again in the second round, and they take an offensive tackle, and a darn good one, Cap, in my estimation. Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota, the selection for Houston, the 16th pick of night number 2, the 48th overall selection. Now, Cap, he had around a plus 350 price, did Ursary, the Golden Gophers blindside blocker from a season ago, to be a first-round selection. Not likely to be on night number 1, but we thought early on night number 2. What was the evaluation for Houston prioritizing offensive line?
Yeah, and listen, Blake Fisher, they drafted last year as a second-rounder. He probably could play right tackle for them. Cam Robinson, he's on a short-term deal. He's a guy that the Jaguars didn't want, the Vikings didn't want back. He's a one-year solution. This makes sense. We just talked about before the break that they need to go offensive line here. They did that. They're reshaping their line, man. Remember, they traded Tunsil. This is completely different. They were completely reshaping their tackle group.
C.J. Stroud sacked 52 times a season ago, second most for a single quarterback in the National Football League in 2024, Kev.
I'm going to send it back to you guys pretty quickly because there's a couple of questions that I now have on some fallers. Demetrius Knight Jr., linebacker out of South Carolina, is where Cincinnati goes with their round number 2 selection. My question, though, is 2 names that I think many could have suggested would make sense here. Mike Green out of Marshall, the edge rusher, or maybe even Siobhan Revel, the cornerback who did suffer an injury at ECU this year, but people thought had round 1 talent. Ben, if you or, of course, certainly our insider Adam Kaplan could shed a little additional light on 2 names that many believe have the talent but have not heard their name called just yet.
Yeah, Kevin, it's a great point. Both for Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall, who led all of FBS college football a season ago with 17.5 sacks, and Savone Revel out of East Carolina, Cap. It doesn't seem to be the talent. No, it seems to be other things. What are you hearing?
All right, Mike Green, strictly character. Accusations coming from a previous stop at UVA of off-the-field stuff, which pretty serious accusations. Never charged with anything, to be clear. And Revel has come back from torn ACL. In fact, I'm told he absolutely would have been a first-round pick without it. Going to a small school, but he's got the length, talent. There's always a reason why guys drop.
Yeah.
Medical, character, system fit. It's always one of the 3. It's very rare that a first-round talent will drop out if he doesn't hit one of those benchmarks.
And what are those conversations among those NFL draft rooms? Because maybe at some point this guy's draft stock starts to slide, but as we get later and later throughout a NFL draft, Cap, we get here in night number 2, round 3. If a guy has first-round talent but some issues off the field, when do you start to weigh those 2 in consideration?
All right, so Ben, Bill Polian, the Hall of Fame general manager of the Colts, told me if the guy is someone you don't want in your building, it doesn't matter that it's the 7th round. If you don't want him in your building, you don't draft him. Now, I want to talk about the Eagles very quickly here with Jalen Carter now 3 years ago, right? Yeah. He had, you know what, at Georgia, he had the auto racing issue, okay? Anger and other stuff. Eagles felt in their building they could handle him. They did the research, the psychological profile, they thought they could handle him. Not every team thought that. Every other team in the top 10 said, we don't want him on our team. Okay, best player for that draft. But the Eagles knew something. They felt they could handle him. It's about the information gathering, whether you think you could handle it.
Every NFL organization does things slightly differently, right? Kevin. Here at the 50th spot, the Seattle Seahawks on the clock. Of course, the signing of Sam Darnold this offseason, they're not thinking quarterback, are they?
It was leading the charge. They wouldn't think quarterback for many, many moons. They've got their guy. I am not sure that's the case. Seattle isn't sure that's the case. The contract reflects they're interested, they're optimistic, but if they pass the baton, it wouldn't be stunning. I imagine if this was a quarterback here, Sam Darnold's first phone call goes to Kirk Cousins, asks, hey, buddy, how do you handle that situation? But Seattle is a team that wants to compete. Despite the teardown, Joe, to some degree this offseason, this team wants to be in the playoffs this year.
They do, and think about what the pieces that they moved on from, right? DK Metcalf, and obviously they have JSN there, but they have Zach Charbonnet. They did want to run the football a little bit more and work off of play action, right? And now we have Sam Darnold leading the charge. Can he be that guy to elevate this team past where Geno Smith got them, right?
Yeah.
I think so, but if they...
We'll leave it there. We're going to hit a break, and we'll come back with you right here on Sports Grid NFL Draft Coverage.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve to be first round, have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Himmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
The pick is in at 50. It's Elijah Arroyo, Miami, tight end off the board at 51. It was the Denver Broncos. A trade back. Carolina comes up and now will make the selection at 51. Here on day number 2, we have the ability certainly to look back towards day number 1. And Joe, the Ted McMillan pick was for some a divider. Some believe that McMillan was clearly the best wide receiver in this draft. Others not as high. Even those who like McMillan wonder if the Carolina Panthers and their atrocious defense should have been addressed with the 8th overall selection. How did you feel now even with a little bit more time to digest that move with Carolina picking McMillan at 8th overall.
I loved it. Again, we talked about they tried to fill this need with Leggett last year. It didn't work out. He was a little bit inconsistent. Surely not the same type of home run hitter like Tet McMillan is in terms of this offense. He's 6'4", he's 220 pounds. He runs a 4.4, catches the football at its highest point. I made the comp. He's a poor man's Mike Evans. Well, we'll see if he could develop in terms of a future Hall of Famer, but he's a player that could really transform that offense. And now you put him with Adam Thielen. You put him with Leggett. You put him now with Bryce Young that's really progressed in that offense. He's a confident quarterback now. You add those weapons. And, oh, by the way, Chuba Hubbard's there as well to pound the rock. This offense now has an identity, Kevin. I think they're definitely now poised for potentially an 8 or 9 win season. Whether they can get there with Canales, we'll see. Time will tell.
Well, the Carolina Panthers make their move at 51. It's Nick Gordon from Texas A&M. Though, if I know Ben, he'd much prefer me to acknowledge his Purdue days. And the Gordon tape from Purdue, Ben, that's a top 15 pick.
A bona fide pass rusher, Kev, on the edge from West Lafayette, who had a successful single season in College Station at Texas A&M. Cap, the guys were talking about it. 8th overall last night, Teteroa McMillan, giving their young quarterback in Bryce Young some help offensively. But, of course, many demands on that defense. They go with Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. How do you rate the pick for Carolina?
Yeah, I like it. In fact, this is what we talked with Mike Blewett last night, is that this is their number one need was edge rush. They need to address it. All they really have is Clowney. And now they've got Scourton, who's a good player. The thing I like about him, he's got length, he's size, he's got some bulk, which they certainly need. And now they could continue to address other positions. You know, they've addressed wide receiver. They're good at running back. Tight end, they're just okay. They could still address that position. But I like that they're helping Bryce Young, and then they're also helping their defensive coordinator. Their defense last year under Aviro, not very good, particularly with a pass rush.
6.5 the win total for the 2025 NFL season for Carolina, putting the pieces in place to have a successful year in Charlotte. Kev, 52nd on the clock, the Tennessee Titans, who have not made a pick since the very first one of the 2025 NFL draft, and of course, that being Cam Ward.
The interesting thing with Tennessee is as they make this move to bring in Cam Ward, Joe, have they actually given him an opportunity to succeed? This is a Tennessee Titans roster that I look around on the offensive side of the ball and I go, where's the help? Where is it? And they bring in what is always they invite a very difficult situation. When you fire a general manager but retain your head coach, because that then gets very tricky if you're Year 2 head coach is on the hot seat. Things don't go well. You get rid of him. Guess what? QB1 now has head coach number 2. Head coach number 2 maybe doesn't love QB1, and things get odd. I like Cam Ward. I don't mind that pick whatsoever at number 1, Joe. But do you believe that the Tennessee Titans are really giving Cam Ward a legitimate chance to be successful in year 1?
Not yet. We'll see how they pan out the rest of this draft. They don't have an offensive identity with Callahan. Think about what they did in terms of the offseason. Tajay Spears was there, right? They bring in Tony Pollard. That was a little bit of a head-scratcher. They did, take Calvin Ridley from Jacksonville. He stepped up at times with Mason Rudolph and Will Levis, but they've swung and missed in back-to-back seasons, you can say. Will Levis and Malik Willis, 2 quarterbacks that they got in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th rounds respectively and just didn't pan out. Cam Ward's the best quarterback in this draft class. He's a quarterback that extends plays, always keeps his eyes down the field. He's mobile. He can break contain. Is he as athletic as potentially Jaden Daniels? I don't believe so, but he's in that mold where he could take a game over. Every game that Cam Ward played last year, even the losses, Georgia Tech and the ones down the stretch, he stepped up and produced, and that's what you want to see out of your signal caller. You're taking him number 1 overall. He better hit the ground running. Now, what can they do in this draft to really compliment him? They need big play wide receivers. You need to stretch defenses over the top, allow them to cook, and then utilize the rushing attack with both running backs that could catch the football out of the backfield. But they need wide receiver help. Trey Harris would be a great fit with this team.
I think it's great analysis. I think it's a great breakdown. I bet for a lot of you, it's also the most time you've heard discussing the first overall pick in this draft. Cam Ward going to Tennessee was a foregone conclusion for quite some time. There was a lot more conversations in terms of the quarterback position. What would the Giants do? What's going on with Shedeur Sanders? Those were the things that we were trying to figure out. Even when Cam Ward was selected, we couldn't spend that much time on it because the Browns just traded out at 2. It's interesting, Ben, and I'm wondering how you feel around Cam Ward entering into Tennessee this year, because I don't remember a less discussed number 1 overall quarterback like Cam Ward.
It's a really good point, Kev. And not only was Cam Ward a minus 50,000 favorite, but his story was not like the other generationally touted first overall picks. Sure. He was not a Trevor Lawrence. He was not a Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud. He was not a Caleb Williams cap, who was minus 100,000 to go first overall, a draft to go to the Chicago Bears. His evolution to being that solidified number 1 overall pick should have been a part of the conversation. But because it was basically made official before even the draft began, we didn't get to spend all that much time on it. Now we are allowed to do so. And I think it's a fascinating case study for Tennessee, whose win total entering next year is 5.5. Rather mediocre, pretty humble expectations for 2025 in Nashville. It's year number 2, though, under Brian Callahan. What is that offense looking to do next season, now led by Cam Ward?
Yeah, it's still going to be run-based, no question about it. But Cam Ward, Ben, is an aggressive thrower. When they let him throw the football, he could throw it. In fact, I know from talking to the Titans, Ben, they want to close games better. Will Levis, too many mental errors late. I mean, it's just too many mistakes. And they sold some games away. I mean, they just gave them away when you shouldn't have to. When you've got a nice lead in the fourth quarter, right? The running game's good enough. Not great, but it's good enough. The quarterback can't turn the ball over and make mental errors. And that was a problem with Will Levis. And you have to remember, Ben, with Will Levis, this front office didn't draft him. Right. His days were numbered as soon as this new regime took over.
And it was interesting from the odds perspective, Kev, on Cam Ward, because when that new GM, Mike Borgonzi, took the spotlight, he mentioned, hey, I'm fielding calls for those interested in the number 1 overall pick. Cam Ward, during the end of February at the NFL Scouting Combine, was only a minus 135 favorite, cap, to be that first overall selection.
Yeah, and it's definitely been interesting. It went crazy the last 6 weeks. By the way, they just drafted Oladejo from UCLA and edge rusher. He's phenomenal. His RAS score, really high, super freak athlete. I know the Eagles loved him. Jonathan Gannon is a guy that I thought he might have drafted him, but they went another direction. But this kid could play. In fact, remember, they cut Harold Landry. They need edge rush help in the big way, and they just got it.
Yes, they certainly did. First overall, Cam Ward, the quarterback, with the very first pick of the NFL draft. Number 52 overall, Oladejo out of UCLA, Kev.
And at number 53, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go cornerback with Notre Dame's Benjamin Morrison. We thought potentially that could be the position that Tampa Bay would address in round number 1, somewhere even on the defensive side of the ball. Remember, though, they took Emeka Egbuka. A little bit of a surprise at 19, even if, again, the consensus is they got themselves a great football player. We'll talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and everything surrounding this year's draft next.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and you know, launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve the first round, have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Himmy, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Night number 2 in Green Bay, Wisconsin rolls on to the 2025 NFL Draft. And with the 53rd overall pick, Adam Kaplan, as Kevin announced right before the break, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select the cornerback out of Notre Dame, Benjamin Morrison. Again, the talent sky high for the Fighting Irish defensive back, but finds his way into the middle of round number 2. Why?
Lower medical grade. He had a hip issue, in fact, recurring, and that was a problem for clubs. He just could not feel confident. It'll definitely hold up. But the fact that the Bucs took him, Jason Light's one of the better GMs, really does a good job. Been in the league a long time. And he takes a player at a position of major need. They had major problems with Penn last year at corner. The Bucs did. Edge rush is definitely another need for them. But corner, right now, honestly, without a corner in this round here, you would wonder how they're going to line up in the fall. So, yeah, this is a smart pick. Clearly, they feel okay with this hip.
Yeah.
Let's hope it holds up because this kid, Morrison, had first-round grades other than medical.
53rd overall, they go the cornerback out of Notre Dame, Benjamin Morrison. With the 19th overall pick last night in the first round, Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State, 2 guys that squared off in the national championship game this past season. Mike Blewett, the hometown team, on the clock once again. Should be a raucous atmosphere as the Green Bay Packers are getting ready for their second-round pick.
And they make the selection here, Joe. Anthony Belton, offensive tackle out of NC State. So obviously power conference offensive tackle. You really can't blame these teams as we get a little bit deeper into the draft for getting deeper in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Yeah, 6'6", 336 is where he comes in. And think about where Green Bay was, Mike, in terms of the playoff loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. Josh Jacobs got contained by a bigger physical defensive line led by Jalen Carter, and Jordan Love was inconsistent because he was under complete duress the whole game. So now you shore up the offensive line. You protect Jordan Love. He battled through injuries throughout the regular season last year, even in the playoffs. And you have Josh Jacobs, a workhorse that can carry it 25 and 30 times a game. You add Matt Golden in terms of that offense with their pick number 1. Now they have more consistency. They're getting back to the identity, hopefully, of where they were at the end of the regular season a couple of years ago where they knocked off Dallas in the playoff game. Obviously, a very competitive division with the Lions and the Vikings above them. They are a team historically, Joe, that does not do a lot in free agency, and this year was no different. They added Mecole Hardman in free agency, really not much firepower. They did have the number 6 rated offensive line according to Pro Football Focus last season, so Belton adds to it. To your point, another weapon for Jordan Love. And the Packers felt like a team that had certainly preseason momentum. I had them as a Super Bowl contender and a Super Bowl pick. And there were times during the season where we felt like, man, if the Packers just get it all together, if they bring everything together, they're going to leapfrog the Lions and the Vikings. And that never really happened at the end of the season. Started week 1, Mike. They go to Brazil. They go toe-to-toe with the Philadelphia Eagles. Jordan Love suffers the ankle injury. He was never right. Then it was the groin, and then he battled injuries throughout the regular season. Malik Willis came in terms of back backup duty, but at the end of the day, they weren't 100%. And in the playoff loss, they got beat up by a more physical defense. That's why the Eagles won the Super Bowl. But we'll see what it plays out for Green Bay overall. I think win total-wise, 9.5, 8.5 in that area, and they can get there as long as they're healthy. And Bolton and Golden definitely help them get to that level this season. I just want to bring up Trey Harris taken by the L.A. Chargers. To me, Ole Miss, I love this kid. I love Trey Harris. Talk about a productive SEC wide receiver. We talk about Ladd McConkey hitting the ground running last year. Very good wide receiver, produced with Justin Herbert. Quentin Johnson wasn't the answer. Stonehands, as they called him in terms of fantasy, right? But Trey Harris is a home run hitter. You pair him now with that offense. This is an option where Justin Herbert could hit all-pro type of numbers this season.
Yeah, clearly this is a nice addition for the Chargers. Go back to the wall, and Ben and Cap, would love to hear your thoughts about another addition. The Chargers have taken some swings at the wide receiver position and missed, and this is a possibility for one to work out.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Blue. And an offensive focus so far, Cap, for the L.A. Chargers and Jim Harbaugh's second draft as the head coach in Los Angeles. Amari on Hampton at the running back spot. We know how important that is for Harbaugh. And now the great wide receiver out of Ole Miss in Trey Harris. Last year, it felt like it was O-line and defense, the first moves the Chargers were making. This year, they're trying to highlight the spots all around Justin Herbert. What's the offseason plan for L.A. the rest of the way?
Yeah, look, they did address the receiver. They needed one guy really out of this draft. They got that. Offensive line depth, their starting unit should be very good. They got Mekhi Becton coming over for the Eagles, although he's got a very incentive-laden deal. Corner is by far their biggest need. Coming to the draft, we're talking about the Chargers here.
Yeah.
That one should have been a bigger need, no question about it. And they got to get younger at the edge, Ben. Lil Mac, back for one more year.
Yeah.
Tui Pelotu is their other edge rusher, who's Marlon's younger brother. But, yeah, they need corner. Corner by far right now is the biggest need. I don't know how they got away with what they put out there, but very good coaching.
In the last ever first-round pick of the San Diego Chargers, Joey Bosa, of course, not going to be with the Bolts any longer. 2 offensive picks so far for L.A. How happy should Justin Herbert be with the decisions that L.A. is making so far in this draft?
So they got Quentin Johnson. I know people are disappointed in him, but he was better last season. McConkey was awesome.
Yeah.
Ladd McConkey was awesome. But I saw him at the Senior Bowl 2 years ago. Maybe the best first step quickness I saw in the 20-some-odd years I've been to the Senior Bowl. He's been fantastic there. Great last season. So they're building something special here. The coaching under Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, fantastic. Greg Roman, you mentioned the running game. They've got that going. They're starting to build something there, and I got to tell you, they overachieved. I didn't like them over 8.5 last year. I was wrong. I'll admit it. I said it on Pharrell's show. They're better than I expected, and they are going up and up. They're doing a great job there.
Sailed over that number. That's what Jim Harbaugh does. He is a program or organizational builder. A disappointing performance in the postseason, Blue, against the Houston Texans, but a lot of optimism for the Chargers moving into 2025.
As Adam said, Ladd McConkey, tremendous last year in his rookie season. We'll see if a second-round pick wide receiver can work for the second year in a row for the Chargers. Joe, Bears on the clock right now. Loveland and Burden. Do they finally flip to the other side of the ball and go defense? They've added so much on offense this offseason.
Yeah, you have a coach in Ben Johnson that loves to put up 50, 60 points a game. We'll see. I still think they might go offense, Mike.
Yeah, it's certainly a loaded room now for wide receivers and tight ends. What could they add? Is there a replacement coming in the backfield for the Chicago Bears? More with SportsGrid right after this.
This is Greg. He bet a long snapper would go in the second round.
The long snapper from Florida is still waiting for his name to be called.
Now this is EJ. EJ tuned into SportsGrid's draft coverage. He checked the app, tracked the markets, followed the pros. He didn't guess. He knew. Be EJ. SportsGrid draft coverage continues Friday at 7 p.m. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, what tools can you use to measure those things a bit? And that's where you have like force plates and 3D motion and you know, launch monitors, things like that. But that's all just sort of like measuring what's happening. That doesn't necessarily explain why one guy's really good and another guy's not really good. And that's where there's still kind of like this ongoing, how do you like continue to do research to understand that better? And I think that's going to last well past my lifetime.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Hasn't been a ton of indication that Cleveland is even looking at anybody outside of Travis Hunter. The Giants, yes, have worked out Shedeur Sanders.
I do think there's going to be at least 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Not because they deserve the first round, have a first round grade on them per se, but the fact that you get the extra year of control, somebody's going to slide into one of those 30, 31, or 32 slots and grab a quarterback.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You cannot shoot 2 of 17 from 3 and think you're beating Steph and Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Playoff Jimmy, Playoff him, Hemi, whatever you want to call him. You can't shoot that bad and compete in the playoffs versus the Warriors. SGA wasn't even that good. You want to talk about non-competitive series? People want to talk about getting rid of play-in. Maybe we need to get rid of the 8 seed because this 8 seed got their ass kicked.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Ben, Tate Radledge.
57.
And we are back. Live coverage of the 2025 NFL Draft here on SportsGrid. Mike Blewett, Joe Lisi. We got Ben and Adam on the wall. Kev Walsh will join us in just a few minutes, and obviously the picks are flying fast and furious. So, Joe, we talked right before the break. Could the Bears add somebody else on offense? They do, but not a weapon necessarily. It is Ozzie Trapillo out of Boston College, the second BC player picked in this second round. 6'8" and 1/8 inches, 316 pounds. Perhaps not the athletic freak that you see with some of the other offensive tackles, but a massive player to be able to protect Caleb Williams.
Huge wingspan, right?
Yes.
And played left and right tackle at BC, right? And he has upside. I think that's the biggest thing is that he could play a couple of different positions. You could work with him in terms of his technique. I mean, 6'8", Mike, and still only about 320, 330. He could still add maybe another 10 pounds of muscle and still be, footwork-wise perfect on the next level. They want to run the football. They want to work off play action, and they want to protect Caleb Williams. This adds to that, and you get depth in terms of the offensive line. Caleb Williams got sacked 50-plus times last year. Can't have that if they're going to compete in the NFC North.
Sorry, Joe. Ton of experience for Trapillo, and every highlight reel you see is what Joe said. They have him at right tackle. They have him at left tackle. They have him inside. A couple of his teammates have made it their way to the NFL from BC. Trapillo is yet another one. Over to the guys to see yet another offensive addition for the Bears. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good one, Blue. We knew that Chicago would prioritize that throughout this offseason. It's one of the staples, Cap, of what we saw for Ben Johnson in Detroit. Solidify that offensive line, and everything else offensively can take off from there.
Ben, they have 3 new starters on the interior of their offensive line right now. Where are they looking here for Trapillo? Probably left tackle. Why? Braxton Jones, just been okay. Right tackle Darnell Wright should still stay there. So you're potentially going to have 4 new starters this season. That's a lot, but you know what? Ben Johnson went through this as an offense coordinator. With Detroit, over a 4 or 5 year span, they completely overhaul their offensive line. Probably one of the 2 best in football. Bears had to address it. They did that. I like what they're doing, and I love the pick in the first round. I know Bears fans are like, a tight end. They've got Kmet. Play more 12 personnel, which means 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, 1 back. They're overhauling completely the way this offense looks.
Colston Loveland in round number 1. Luther Burden III out of Missouri earlier tonight. And now Ozzie Trapillo out of Boston College as well. Ben Johnson's former team Blue on the clock with the 57th overall pick, that being the Detroit Lions.
Chicago's GM, a former BC offensive lineman in Ryan Poles. He brings in a guy that he probably feels a kinship with, so a fun story there for Bears fans. As he said, Lions on the clock. It is a team that we saw last night just address basic needs, Joe. They're not being fancy. They have a pretty stacked team that fell apart a little bit at the end of the year due to injury, but they still made it pretty deep into the season. What do you think they should do here? What would help this team best?
I still think they need to address the defensive side side of the ball. Offensive pieces are in place, right? Sam Laporta, Jamison Williams. You have St. Brown at the wide receiver position, Jahmyr Gibbs, and your quarterback in terms of Jared Goff. I still think they need secondary help. And look at what Jaden Daniels in Washington did in terms of the playoff win, right? They abused that defense. They need help on the defensive side of the ball. You can never have too much depth. Defensive line and secondary is where I go.
So we do have the pick, Tate Ratledge, offensive guard out of Georgia. So another big-time program player.
They like to build it from the inside out, right? You can never, in terms of taking depth, Tate Ratledge, again, Georgia players, offensive line and defensive line translate to the next level. And you look at Ratledge as well. He's another big physical guard. They want to run the football right down your throat, and Ratledge helps you do that in terms of this season.
Yeah, Tyleek Williams last night, Tate Ratledge tonight. So they are clearly getting much bigger, and they are making an impact on those lines. Joe, we will have coming up now, next team on the clock will be, that is the Raiders. So the Raiders have moved back multiple times here. We're still waiting for certain names to be called. But as you said, and I think it was the best comment made tonight, if you're actually going after a quarterback, this is not the way you do it. You don't wait around, trade a bunch of picks, and say, hey, the teams below us have already addressed QB. Maybe we'll get lucky and he'll slide to us. That's not what they're doing here, I don't think.
No, but the Raiders have potential. Their quarterback in Geno Smith for the next couple of seasons. Yeah. I think it's more pressing for teams like New Orleans that got Chuck and your Pittsburgh Steelers that just waited and are still waiting for potentially Aaron Rodgers to make a decision.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Steelers do not have much draft capital to be able to make big moves. They don't pick until 83rd. They'd have to bundle almost the rest of their picks to move up significantly. We'll address some more draft moves significantly right after this on the Grid.